So back lips are relatively simple, really, but there's a few things that you absolutely have to get right, and then they basically click. Like what I see a lot of people do when they're first learning them is put a lot of pressure on this heel. I mean, what you don't want to do is put a lot of pressure on this wheel here in like this heel and sweep everything through the coping. You'll notice that if you do that, like it becomes this whole thing where you're like your whole body is rotating the 180 to get on the coping instead of this position. And you'll notice that your weight is on like this back leg and this heel and this wheel, and it's sweeping. You'll notice it if you end up getting stuck up over the deck and you're like decking every time and you're landing on your back wheels on the coping on the actual deck, or if you're able to stay in the ramp, you'll be over rotating. Everything will be over rotating and you won't be able to come out forward. You'll be like really wanting to come out like backside revert. And really what you want to do is put a little bit of weight on this back toe so you can ride up through the coping and then push your back leg out this way over the deck. It's very different than everything sliding around the corner. That's very different than getting up and pushing your back leg over the deck. The rotation comes from almost from like your feet switching places more so than you rotating. And the reason that I say you want to be on your toe, like you don't want to be on your toes, like leaning super far forward, because really that's essentially the same mistake, but the opposite side of being like too far on your heel and everything sweeping through. If you're too far forward, it's very like surfy, like a surfer slash rotation, and it'll still over rotate you. But that side of things, you're just gonna get stuck in the ramp instead of on the deck. So it's like you're too far back here and you over rotate, get stuck on the deck. You're too far forward, you over rotate, you're stuck in the ramp. So really, you just want weight on this back toe as you kind of slide the board up through the coping more than like a sweeping motion. And I say you want the weight on the toe at all, so the board is not completely flat to the ground, like to the deck. It's got this turn to it. It's on a different axis. So you can go from this position and straighten your back leg out, and the board comes with, because it's, the board is turned and your foot's on it, and you can kind of push the back of the board out over the deck this way, right? And it's seriously more like your feet are switching places than you're rotating, because you look at the upper body, it doesn't really turn. I mean, the hips turn with the legs, but it's not the whole body going. Those shoulders kind of got to stay still. So, I mean, I try my best to keep my shoulders still. It's kind of how I don't try to keep them still. I try to counter rotate my shoulders against my feet so I can stop the rotation. But it's kind of interesting on video. I mean, if you look where they're at now, they don't turn until they absolutely have to. So the shoulders, as this board is rotating, it gets to about 180 and then actually landing on the coping is what starts to make everything rotate. So you can imagine if you rotate into it and then you land on the coping, you're just going to keep going. So even with holding my shoulders so open until landing on the coping, you can tell that coming in, they're still lined up with the board. Like, it's so hard to keep your shoulders too open if you actually get into the back disaster. So that relationship between the feet and that back foot pushing the board out and the shoulders going the other way, those are like the main fundamental pieces to a back lip. Same thing to a front lip, just kind of switch everything around. Little differences, but generally that upper and lower body is going to work like that. And everything in this position is about the same as the back lip. So go watch the back lip if you have any questions. Post up, stand up tall, pushing that back leg out and standing up a little bit. All of that is going to ring true. The next thing that I would definitely focus on is picking a spot on your board. What the hell just happened? Picking a spot on your board that you want to hit, that you want to land on the coping. Don't just fly up this way and try to do a 180. Really be diligent about where on the board you want this lip slide to happen. If I'm going to slide, I'm actually aiming at this spot a little bit inside of that. Right around here. If I'm going to be stopped, like in a back disaster, then I'm a little bit more in the center of the board, but in that same general area of the board. Since it's a disaster and I'm not moving, it's going to land more in the center. If I was sliding, I would be a little bit more on my toes, on the actual coping. So I'm very specific, right, about which spot of the board hits the coping, because that's actually somewhere that you can balance around. I know that I can balance around that spot, even with this twisted up body position. I have to do it on smaller transitions because I can kind of be dead foot. I can kind of have a dead back foot and just kind of slide everything through so I can land on it, and I can practice those little feely rotation moments. Movements. So if you're just learning them, right, go on something smaller. But if you're trying to go from smaller to bigger, right, learning how to scoop instead of slide. Okay, so my board is still sliding, so I don't want to say like you have to get completely rid of the slide, but the slide isn't coming from my entire body rotating, right? And this is something that I never do switch, which just by doing this walkthrough, I'm going to start applying. Notice how the tail of the board is going this way, right? The board doesn't just start rotating, right? That tail of the board actually is going to slide to the right. So I am still center on this board. If you watch a back lip of yours from this angle, and this back foot, instead of being out here, if this back foot is like in line with the shoulder, which is definitely going to happen to a lot of you guys, I promise you, that's going to deck you and it'll rotate you. Okay, so this is part of this motion, getting that board out, getting that back foot to come out to the side of you a little bit is really going to help free your body up to move. I mean, think about it like like a golf swing. Your feet are outside of your shoulders and you rotate in there. If you get too much with this foot, if this foot doesn't get out here, you're going to be screwed when it comes to counter rotating. And I promise. And that's exactly what I do wrong on back lips. I've been trying switch back lips on vert and I can't figure it out. And this is precisely the motion from right here, how the board kind of slides this way a little bit. It's like you pick up the board and then you scoop it underneath you. And boom. And it can be a little weird at first. Like once you get on, everything is trying to rotate so hard and you kind of got to hold on for dear life with this, with your lead shoulder and that foot. Hold it for a sec and then bring everything in. Don't let it turn you backwards into the ramp if that's not what you're trying. If you can apply those things, you see how there's a little bit of weight on those toes, on this back toe right here. So this back foot can push straight out over the deck. So yeah, if you do that, you should be pretty set.